I'm here to say that there is new hope for the treatment of trauma, both post-traumatic stress disorder and also multi-generational trauma that passes down fears, anxiety, and conflicts through the generations. This hope is coming from a psychedelic drug called MDMA, which is being scientifically studied by a nonprofit pharmaceutical company that I started in 1986. MAPS began as a nonprofit pharmaceutical company, and I didn't realize at the time that no drug had ever been made into a medicine by a nonprofit organization. MDMA was invented in 1912 by Merck Pharmaceutical Companies, but they didn't know what they had, and they abandoned it. And it was rediscovered in the 1970s by a group of psychotherapists in the United States that administered it quietly in order to keep it from being criminalized. And it was administered to about 500,000 people in quiet therapeutic settings, but it escaped from those settings and it became marketed as ecstasy. And that attracted the attention of the Drug Enforcement Administration in the United States, and they moved to criminalize it in 1984. And a group of advocates that I helped to organize filed for a hearing. And in that hearing, the judge, after hearing a lot of testimony, said that MDMA should be available as a legal prescription medicine. But the administrator of the Drug Enforcement Administration rejected that recommendation and criminalized both the therapeutic and the recreational use of MDMA. And that's why I started MAPS, to try to take it through the FDA. But it actually took us 30 years to do the necessary studies to move to our meeting with the FDA, what's called an end of phase 2 meeting, to plan moving into phase 3, which are the final studies that you need to do to prove safety and efficacy in order to obtain permission for prescription use. One story of healing in one of the veterans that was in our study was John Lubecki. He served 12 years in the U.S. Army and in the Marines and served in Iraq. And when he came back to the United States, he was so emotionally troubled that he attempted suicide 5 times. The last time he put a gun to his head, he pulled the trigger, and it misfunctioned miraculously. And he finally decided to get help. And he went to the Veterans Administration, but none of the treatments that they offered him actually worked. And then he decided to volunteer for our project, which was to study MDMA-assisted psychotherapy. And our treatment is actually 3 MDMA sessions only, 1 month apart, with 12 90-minute non-drug psychotherapy sessions, 3 before the first MDMA session for preparation, and 3 after each MDMA session for integration. And after the treatment, John said, "I cannot emphasize how much MDMA-assisted psychotherapy has changed my life. I went from constant daily suicidal ideation, anxiety, depression, to almost nothing. The best part of this was it was not lifelong treatment and medication." Now, what is PTSD? It's a reaction to trauma or a series of traumas. And the way that it's measured is 4 different symptom clusters: re-experiencing the trauma in nightmares during the day, in intrusive memories, avoidance of anything that reminds somebody of the trigger. Sometimes people don't leave their homes for long periods of time. Anxiety, depression, emotional numbness. And it's measured in this way and quantified. And the amount of PTSD that people have is actually rather astonishing. 6 to 10% of people will get PTSD at some point during their lifetime. Roughly 18% of Iraq War veterans have PTSD. One survey has shown that 19% of human rights activists have PTSD, and another 19% have symptoms of PTSD that don't rise to the level of a diagnosis. Just being here today and listening to these stories has been incredibly painful. And so you can understand how difficult it is to be struggling for human rights. But most people that have PTSD don't get it from war. They get it from sexual assault. They get it from childhood abuse, from accidents, from operations, from assault, from violent crime, torture, imprisonment, and living in repressive regimes. And only 40 to 60% of patients actually receive successful treatment. The treatments that are available are primarily pharmaceuticals that are meant to be taken on a daily basis that reduce the symptoms but don't actually cure the problem, and that are required to be used for months, years, and sometimes lifetimes. And when they stop taking, the problems come back. And there are some psychotherapies that are effective for some people, but there's a high dropout rate because it's very re-traumatizing for people sometimes to have to confront and talk about the trauma. And PTSD actually changes your brain. PTSD increases activity in the amygdala, the fear processing part of the brain. So people are hypersensitive to fear-based emotions. PTSD reduces the activity in the prefrontal cortex, where we think logically and put things in association. So people are more emotionally driven. And PTSD reduces activity in the hippocampus, where we put memories into long-term storage. But MDMA does the opposite. It increases activity in the prefrontal cortex so we can think more logically. It reduces activity in the amygdala so we're able to recall fearful memories more easily. And it increases connectivity between the hippocampus and the amygdala to facilitate the long-term storage of memories. It releases a series of neurotransmitters, and it also releases hormones, oxytocin and prolactin. And these are the hormones of nursing mothers, of people in love, and this helps build a therapeutic alliance between the patient and the therapists. The data that we presented to the FDA after 30 years for our end of phase 2 meeting showed that our therapy with inactive MDMA actually helped 23% of the people who no longer had PTSD at the end of the treatment. But when you add, and that's not actually that bad for comparison to other treatments, but when you add MDMA, it more than doubles to 56%. But this also starts a process of healing. And so people who have chronic, severe, treatment-resistant PTSD, 12 months after the treatment, no longer, more than 2/3 no longer have PTSD. We just published a paper in Lancet Psychiatry about our work with veterans, firefighters, and police officers. And we actually did have a police officer volunteer for the study, several firefighters, and 22 veterans. And we got bipartisan media coverage in Fox News, New York Times, CNN, and all sorts of military newspapers and journals. And to give you a sense of what it is that I'm actually talking about, we have a very brief video of a therapy session with a veteran. This was his first MDMA session, 75 milligrams, and he was struggling with rage and other symptoms of PTSD.
Try and think of that really rageful aspect of me, like I can't even, I know it's there, it just doesn't, I really feel like so much more at peace with everything.
Great.
Like even if I try and think about Iraq and everything, like I somehow feel like really peaceful about the fact that that's my journey. And that
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
part of me think, I mean, I know this is part of the, part of the drug, but when I try and think, am I going to be able to hold on to this, this understanding, and this somewhat of wisdom and knowledge that I have now?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just asking myself that question, I feel like it's so profound that I don't think I could really forget it.
Yeah. It's much different than what you might think of for psychedelic therapy. And on the basis of our data, the FDA designated MDMA-assisted psychotherapy as a breakthrough therapy. And we're starting to negotiate with the European Medicines Agency to bring this treatment to Europe, and we've been able to raise $26 million in donations for phase 3. But I think how much an enormous amount of suffering could have been stopped if not for the drug war 30 years ago, when the judge said that MDMA should be a medicine. The drug war is a fundamental violation of human rights. It violates people's scientific research. It violates the ability of freedom of thought, of cognitive liberty, and it obstructs scientific freedom. Many of the activists here suffer from some amount of PTSD or know other people that suffer from PTSD. And what I'd like to leave you with is a sense that there is hope, that we are bringing new treatments. MDMA-assisted psychotherapy is the most effective treatment that we're aware of for PTSD. And so together, I think we can end the nightmare of PTSD. Thank you.